it's one of these things where I know if I was to start a national campaign around marriage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Multiracial, multi-ethnic, everybody's in. But for the component that sort of focus on the Black community, because there are some specific challenges there in terms of why people think marriage disappeared. And I took that to the NAACP and I said, hey, I want you guys to join on with me. They said, nah, no thanks. Now, if I took them a same-sex adoption campaign, oh yeah, they'll join on with that.
Right.
So it's one of these things where, getting back to sort of Big Eva, you need people. And I think I said this later in the column. We got ushers when we needed guardians, and it's one of the things that, to be quite frank, I think the feminization of the church writ large ushered in a number of changes in terms of how people communicate, what types of things get let in the door. Because women, generally speaking, tend to care more about people having a sense of belonging, feeling included, feeling comfortable. They tend to be more relational. And that's the perfect type. That is exactly who you want when it comes to making a home, right, or making people feel comfortable in a particular space. That's not the person you want when it comes to guarding the city gate.
Yes.
And a lot of men have abdicated their responsibility, both in the church, in the community, and even in the home. I mean, some of the things I write about, and my kids are small, 6, 3, and 2. But I know that there's some guys who are just as afraid to say anything to their teenage daughters as they are to their wives, right? If they really thought, I don't want my daughter wearing, some tight shorts with the word juicy across the bottom, but I don't, who am I to tell her what to do with her body? And she's 16. And, it's one of those things where I think we're reaping what we've been sowing for generations. Right. And for generations, men who have not been willing to lovingly stand up to the people in their lives that they care about the most, we're seeing that those men also will not stand up for them.
That's right.
They didn't stand up to them, and now they're not standing up for them.
That's right. Yeah, if you don't have the strength to stand up to someone, then you're not going to have the strength to stand up for them. You're absolutely right. And I think pastors have failed by preaching against, again, it's the gnat and the camel, right? So you're swallowing a camel, while straining out a gnat. Pastors, would preach sermons about, boys who could shave, and these kinds of things. And it was always hard on men. Every Mother's Day was, aren't we grateful for moms, and every Father's Day was like, you should do better. You guys are,
Right.
Lousy. And one of the big sins, that would be addressed with men is being overly dominant, being too forceful, being aggressive, abuse, but masculinity can fail in one of two directions. You can fall off the wall on one of two sides. You can abuse, but you can also abdicate, right? So there can be aggression, and unholy aggression, because there is a righteous aggression. The kingdom of God, since the beginning has suffered violence, and the violent take it by force. Nobody's going to waltz into the kingdom apart from waging holy violence. And the Puritans used to talk about, Thomas Watson has a whole section talking about waging holy violence. But you can fall off on the ungodly, unrighteous violence, aggression, that kind of side. But you can also fall off on the apathy and the abdicating side. And again, it's like we take the minority and we preach to that. And I think the reason why is, and we all do this, but pastors, they do it at a mass level. They do it publicly. But I think the reason why that's in the heart of men is because, again, it's cowardice, it's the fear of man, it's loving the glory that comes from man more than the glory that comes from God. Because ultimately, if I could describe it, it's this. What we're doing is we're addressing the enemy that's already been slain rather than the enemy that's currently at large. So it's like, when Amazon, says elevating black voices, that would be courage if it was 50 years ago.
Right.
but you're too late to be courageous. Like SNL did their skit, they were just ridiculous where they're making fun of, basically poking fun at themselves for maybe we took COVID too far. And maybe and did I really have to completely cut off that friendship with someone that I knew for 15 years just because they didn't want to get their 4th booster shot? And we're all laughing. It's like, yeah, but wait a second. It's been 2 years, and you guys are the spitting image of the ones who are doing that. It's too late. It's not courage. It's not even comedy. Comedy requires courage. That's why nobody's funny anymore. There's no comedy anymore because comedy requires, it assumes a certain measure of courage to cross the line, but nobody's willing to cross the line. And so we're basically walking around and we're getting in a circle around an enemy that's already been slain, a rotting dead corpse, and taking turns kicking it. Meanwhile, it's like the enemy is actually, there's another enemy over here that's at large, that's currently walking around and terrorizing people. And so all that being said, my point is, pastors preaching about men, with abuse, that again, and immediately the counter, somebody listening to this would say, I have this experience, and my stepdad, he was abusive. And we're not saying that abuse doesn't exist. We're not saying racism doesn't exist. But we're saying, is this really the predominant enemy of our hour? And I think, I've been quoting this a lot lately, but a Martin Luther quote where he says, wherever the battle rages the fiercest, there the loyalty of the soldier is tried. If he is faithful in battle on every other field, but the one point that is currently being contested, he is not professing Christ. That he's failed. He's not a faithful follower of Jesus. And so I think that we have these points that are currently being contested, that the battle of Bunker's Hill, the point where it's actually being contested, and we won't address it. And so that means talking to men about the sin of apathy, not just abuse, because I think that's far more pervasive. But it also requires men preaching about the sins of women in their church. And I think what we've done, talk about abdicating, so you won't preach on the sin of abdicating with males because you, pastor, as a male, are committing that sin by abdicating your responsibility. You're not pastor of half of the church.
Yeah.
I'm patriarchal. I don't even like complementarian. I feel like that's too squishy. So I am patriarchal. I believe in male pastors. I hold to a male diaconate. And the male pastors that God has appointed in a church are pastors of the whole church, not just the men in the church. And that doesn't mean the women can't get together and do certain things, but this idea of women's ministry and women's leaders, and those women become pseudo pastors of, and you have 2 other churches. And then, don't get me started, but you throw in, childcare on top of it. I'm family integrated, but, Dr. Martin Luther King, he used to, Sunday morning is the most segregated hour in America. I think it's still the most segregated, but not by race, but by gender and age. So anyways, my point is pastors, we drop the ball, and Christians at a large level, we drop the ball by not addressing the sin of the hour and thinking we can't address the sins of women. Certainly we need to be gentle there. But there is something to be said for Elijah, decrying the sins of Jezebel. So it's not, he doesn't just speak to Ahab for being a pushover. He also condemns Jezebel. So I think we got both alive and well in the church today. We've got Ahab and Jezebel.
They won't let you talk about Jezebel today. They say that they're called the tone police, which is the only law enforcement that some of them actually support. And they'd say you can't say that. Oh, that's not loving. This is the downside of patriarchy, and I think, as you said, we need people, and particularly men, with courage.
Wait. Real quick, before you go, do me a favor. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell so you'll be notified with all our new content as it comes out on a daily basis. And if you're willing to support this ministry, you can do so by going to rightresponseministries.com/donate. Thanks so much. God bless.